Biggie predicted 9/11. He was a Brooklyn king, taken too soon in 1997, leaving behind verses that became part of rap's foundation. But among all the rhymes he ever dropped, there's one line that still echoes louder than most. A line so specific, so eerie that for a lot of people, it tore a hole straight through the official story of 9/11. The song was Juicy, off his debut album Ready to Die, released in 1994. The lyric was simple: time to get paid, blow up like the world trade. It sounded like a victory chant, but after 2001, it became something else entirely. The question that has lingered ever since is how a man killed in Los Angeles in 1997 could have dropped a bar that seemed to predict the destruction of the Twin Towers years before it actually happened. For some, it's coincidence. For others, it's a prophecy. Back in 1993, before Ready to Die even hit stores, the World Trade Center had already been attacked. A car bomb detonated in the parking garage beneath the towers, killing 6 people and injuring more than 1,000. The explosion shook Lower Manhattan and became the first sign that America wasn't as untouchable as it thought. In New York, the event dominated every headline and conversation.
A possible bomb explodes under the towering World Trade Center in New York. 5 people are killed, at least 500 injured.
This is NBC.
Biggie, still a rising artist from Bedford-Stuyvesant, was deeply connected to the city's pulse. The smoke from that bombing could be seen from neighborhoods like his, so when he recorded Juicy and dropped that line, blow up like the world trade, most people figured he was simply referencing the 1993 attack. It was a metaphor, nothing more. The towers had already been bombed once, and blow up was just a way of saying blow up in fame. That's the mainstream explanation. It fits cleanly into context, but it's also where the theory begins to twist. Because when you look back at the 1993 bombing, you see that the plan wasn't just to scare anyone, it was to bring the entire building down. The attackers had tried to collapse one tower into the other. They failed, but the goal had always been total destruction. So when Biggie dropped that lyric a year later, some believe he wasn't just talking about what already happened, but what was supposed to happen, the original plan that didn't succeed until 2001. And for years, the lyric just sat there, ignored, as another sharp punchline from a rapper who always spoke with cinematic precision. But after September 11, 2001, everything changed. The day the towers fell, the nation froze. In the weeks that followed, the entertainment industry scrambled to respond. TV shows were edited, movie scenes were cut, and in the music world, more than 100 songs were suddenly blacklisted from radio rotation, tracks that mentioned bombs, planes, or New York landmarks. Among them was Biggie's Juicy. The line that had once symbolized ambition was now viewed as too painful, too controversial, too close to something that had just become national trauma. Radio DJs were ordered to remove or mute it completely. For longtime listeners, the change was jarring. If you turned on the radio after 9/11 and Juicy played, you'd hear a strange silence, 1.5 seconds of dead air right where that lyrics used to hit. That small moment of silence changed everything, because for conspiracy theorists, it was evidence. They asked if the lyric was just a harmless reference to 1993, why erase it? Why pretend it wasn't there? Why did the media suddenly treat that bar like radioactive material? To them, that silence meant fear, and fear in their eyes meant Biggie had said something he wasn't supposed to. The theory spread quickly online in forums, message boards, and later, social media threads. People compared timelines, dissected interviews, and replayed Juicy over and over. They pointed to the 7-year gap in the accuracy of the line. The phrase, blow up like the world trade, had only one meaning after 2001, and for many, it sounded less like coincidence and more like a warning that no one understood in time. Soon, a second layer of speculation formed. If Biggie had somehow stumbled onto information about long-term plots against the Twin Towers, could that explain his own murder in 1997? The theory has persisted for years. It suggests that Biggie's death wasn't just the tragic result of the East Coast-West Coast feud, but a silencing operation. That his murder in Los Angeles was part of a cover-up, orchestrated by forces far beyond the music industry. Believers claim he was a loose end, someone who might have learned something through his New York connections and revealed it through music without realizing its implications. It's a theory that sounds wild on the surface, but it keeps resurfacing, decade after decade. On forums, Reddit threads, and TikToks, the conversation reignites. Some listeners say the Juicy lyric feels too clean, too specific to be random. Others note how quickly it was scrubbed from public airwaves after 9/11, framing that erasure as deliberate. it. Each new listener becomes another link in the chain of speculation, convinced that the government and media acted to bury something deeper. The persistence of that idea is what gives the theory its staying power. Biggie's own mystique feeds it. He was always painted as a prophet of the streets, a man who saw life and death in equal measure. His music often carried an eerie self-awareness, as if he knew where his story was headed long before it happened. In that sense, hearing him predict 9/11 fits into the legend. There's another reason why the theory endures: the sheer poetry of the coincidence. Juicy was Biggie's breakout anthem, a story of triumph over struggle, a record about surviving poverty and reaching the top. Yet buried in that song of celebration was a line that would later align with one of the darkest moments in American history. To this day, the lyric's meaning remains debated. Scholars and journalists point back to 1993, to the bombing that inspired it, saying that's all it ever was. But for believers, it's more than context. They believe the 1993 attack was only the beginning of a plan that unfolded exactly as it was meant to, and that Biggie's line, intentionally or not, captured that dark inevitability. And so does the censorship. More than 2 decades later, radio stations still use the edited version. Even streaming platforms have kept it that way. Nipsey Hussle found AIDS cure. Before his untimely death, Nipsey Hussle was building a legacy that stretched far beyond music. But in the final months of his life, he turned his attention toward a project that, according to many, carried a fatal risk, exposing a medical secret that could shake the foundation of a billion-dollar pharmaceutical industry. The story goes back to a man named Alfredo Bowman, better known as Dr. Sebi, a Honduran herbalist with no formal medical degree, but an unshakable belief that natural herbs could cure illnesses considered incurable. From sickle cell to lupus, cancer, and even AIDS, Sebi claimed to have discovered holistic treatments that restored the body's balance without drugs. His followers saw him as a healer. His critics called him a fraud, but his story would go on to inspire one of hip-hop's most respected voices. In 2018, Nipsey Hussle announced he was working on a documentary about Dr. Sebi's 1985 trial against the state of New York, where Sebi claimed in a newspaper ad that he had cured AIDS. The state accused him of practicing medicine without a license, but according to reports from the time, the judge demanded proof: actual patients cured of diseases like AIDS and cancer. Sebi showed up with dozens of witnesses who presented medical documents supporting his claims.
Defended yourself. Of course I did. I knew that I had sufficient evidence to prove my position. Not only did I prove scientifically, but I had the diagnostic sheets, and I do have them today.
The court couldn't convict him of fraud, ruling instead that he wasn't technically diagnosing or treating people, but offering food-based compounds. For Sebi supporters, this trial was the smoking gun, proof that someone had publicly proven a natural cure for AIDS and walked away legally untouched. For Nipsey, this was more than folklore. He called it a powerful story that deserved to be told, a story hidden in plain sight. If the world saw the official records, he believed it could change everything people thought they knew about medicine.
Anybody in this room, if I could say, hey, somebody cured AIDS, y'all be like, yeah, right. And then I could show you an example of him going to trial, proven in a court. Y'all would be interested in that.
Absolutely.
And y'all would look into the way he did it, right? So I feel like more so than like championing his products or explaining his methodology.
But it was this very idea that he was about to reveal something too big to contain that many fans later connected to his death. To understand why, you have to look at how Dr. Sebi's own story ended. Decades after his legal victory, Sebi continued to promote his alkaline diet and herbal treatments, traveling between the United States and his healing village in Honduras. In 2016, at the age of 82, he was arrested in Honduras for carrying large sums of cash and charged with money laundering. Before he could be released, he died in custody. The official cause of death was pneumonia, but those close to him didn't buy that. They said he had been in good health and that his death seemed too convenient. Even Sebi's own words seemed to predict what would happen. He often told his family he was being watched and warned that his work could get him killed. Speaking about curing his 13th AIDS patient, he recalled, "When I told my mama I had cured my 13th AIDS patient, she said they gonna get you." Before he died in jail, Sebi told his family on the phone that he refused to eat the food provided by his captors because "I know someone's trying to kill me."
When I told my mama that I had cured my 13th AIDS patient, she said, "They gonna get you."
By the time Nipsey started investigating, the legend of Dr. Sebi had already taken root in black communities across America. Many saw Sebi's teachings as a challenge to an establishment that had long ignored or exploited them. Nipsey wasn't just documenting a healer, he was amplifying a story of independence, resistance, and health through nature. But even he seemed aware of the risk. Friends recalled him being warned to be careful, that his project could put him in danger. He recalled people tweeting him the exact warning, "Hussle, be careful man, yo plane gonna go down." Nipsey brushed it off, but those warnings would take on haunting meaning just months later. Then came March 31st, 2019. Nipsey Hussle was gunned down outside his Marathon clothing store in Los Angeles. The news stunned the world. To the police, it was an argument that escalated into murder, but to those who had been following his work on the Sebi documentary, it looked like something far bigger. They connected the dots. Lisa Left Eye Lopez, another celebrity supporter of Dr. Sebi, had died in a car crash while visiting his compound in 2002. Sebi died in police custody in 2016, and now Nipsey, another advocate planning to expose it all, was dead. 3 figures tied to one man's mission, all gone before the story could be told. When the police named Eric Holder as the shooter, they dismissed the idea of a larger plot. They called it a personal dispute, but the timing and pattern were enough to convince many that Nipsey had been silenced. To them, the government or pharmaceutical powers had simply used street violence as camouflage. Still, no hard evidence has ever surfaced to support that theory. Medical experts insist Sebi's claims of curing AIDS are unproven and scientifically impossible without antiviral treatment. The documents he presented in court were never verified through scientific study, and his cures remain anecdotal. But for people who have seen too many examples of systemic exploitation, the lack of proof doesn't erase the possibility, it strengthens the mistrust. What's undeniable, though, is the cultural power of the story. After Nipsey's death, Nick Cannon announced he would take over the documentary project, promising to finish what Nipsey started. The CIA flooded black communities with crack. The crack epidemic of the 1980s is often described as one of America's darkest social crises. The official story blames it on poverty, lack of opportunity, and the failure of law enforcement to keep up. But to many who lived through it, there's another version, a theory that the poison wasn't just a byproduct of street life, but a part of a deliberate plan. The claim is that the CIA, the same agency charged with protecting the nation, was responsible for flooding inner-city black neighborhoods with crack. According to believers, this was a covert effort to destabilize black communities, crush their economic growth, and destroy their political power. The theory caught fire in 1996 when investigative journalist Gary Webb dropped a bombshell through a series called Dark Alliance. His reporting claimed that a major ring had operated for years, selling massive amounts of drugs to Los Angeles street gangs, and that millions in profits were funneled to a rebel army in Nicaragua, the Contras, who were being secretly supported by the CIA. In other words, cocaine from Latin America was helping fund America's anti-communist war.
It was about a cocaine ring that operated along the west coast of the United States throughout most of the 80s. And some of the money they were making was going to support an army that the men who ran the cocaine ring worked for, that the CIA started in 1981 and supported.
Better known to us, most of us who remember news, the Contras.
Webb traced the money and the drugs, connecting Nicaraguan smugglers, Los Angeles dealers, and CIA-linked operatives. He wrote that the same cocaine that helped fund a war overseas was also the fuel for the crack explosion in America's inner cities. It was a chain reaction that started in the jungles of Central America and ended on the streets of South Central LA. The reaction to Webb's work was explosive. His reporting sparked outrage across the country, especially in black communities that had lived through the devastation firsthand. The backlash was so intense that then CIA Director John Deutsch made a rare public appearance in South Central Los Angeles to personally deny the allegations. It was the first time a CIA head had faced a community meeting like that.
It is an appalling charge that goes to the heart of this country. Found.
How are we supposed to trust the CIA official to investigate themselves?
But instead of digging into the story themselves, the country's biggest newspapers, The Washington Post, New York Times, and Los Angeles Times, turned their focus on Webb. They criticized his reporting, questioned his sources, and painted his investigation as an exaggerated conspiracy. Webb became the target of a coordinated pushback that effectively ended his career. For many, that only made the theory stronger. If the mainstream media was more interested in silencing the reporter than investigating his claims, people believed it must mean he had touched the truth.
All three major newspapers felt completely caught off guard by this story, so they fully attacked Gary Webb with a vengeance and completely attempted to not only discredit his story and frame it as a conspiracy theory, but pretty much ruin his entire reputation.
Years later, documents would reveal that there was more substance to Webb's reporting than many wanted to admit. Even stripped of racial context, the CIA's history showed a clear pattern of dealing with known drug in exchange for intelligence and support during the Cold War. The agency's anti-communist agenda often meant looking the other way when their allies were involved in narcotics. One of the key figures was Danilo Blandón, a Nicaraguan exile who became one of the main suppliers for a dealer named Freeway Rick Ross in Los Angeles. Blandón was working for Norwin Meneses, one of the biggest traffickers in Nicaragua, who had deep ties to the Contra movement. Meneses was known to U.S. authorities, and the DEA had tried to arrest him multiple times but failed, leading many to believe he was being protected because of his CIA connections.
I was getting my coke from a guy by the name of Oscar Danilo Blandón, who also was my informant. He's the guy that set me up with the police. When I went to trial, we found out that he was what they call a Contra. The Contras was backed by the CIA, and it sparked this big investigation by this reporter called Gary Webb.
In 1998, under mounting public pressure, the CIA's own Inspector General released a report that confirmed key parts of the Dark Alliance narrative. It admitted that the agency had been aware that people connected to the Contras were into the U.S. and had done nothing to stop it. The report even stated that the CIA failed to consistently cut off contact with known traffickers and, in some cases, had provided cover that allowed them to operate freely. The agency may not have directly sold drugs, but it clearly allowed drug networks to thrive under its watch.
So you had the CIA finally coming to the table and admitting that what we reported in the 80s and what Webb reported in the 90s was in fact true.
For critics, this was proof that the CIA didn't just stand by. It participated through negligence, creating an environment where profits could be used to fund wars abroad while destroying communities at home. Whether or not it was intentional, the result was the same. Countless black neighborhoods devastated by addiction, violence, and mass incarceration. Government officials, however, have always denied any deliberate racial motivation. They argue the CIA's only focus was defeating communism in Latin America and that the crack epidemic was an unintended consequence of those covert alliances. To them, the agency may have turned a blind eye, but it wasn't orchestrating the destruction of its own citizens. But for all the people who watched their neighborhoods collapse, that distinction doesn't make much difference. The idea that the US government could sacrifice an entire generation of black Americans for a foreign war doesn't feel far-fetched to those who already distrust a system that has historically worked against them. What keeps the theory alive isn't just the words of Gary Webb or the CIA's partial admissions, it's the fact that no one was ever punished. Webb's career was destroyed, and he later died under mysterious circumstances ruled a suicide. Meanwhile, the agency walked away untouched. ODB was murdered by the FBI. He was a one-of-a-kind chaos agent, but beneath the wild energy and the unpredictable antics lay a deep, persistent paranoia. ODB had long believed the government was watching him. He said it often, lived like it was true, and acted like a man preparing for an unseen threat. In November 2024, 2 days before his 36th birthday, he collapsed inside a New York recording studio and never got up again. The medical examiner called it an accidental overdose. But for people who followed his story closely, that explanation felt too real, too easy. It was hard to accept that one of hip-hop's most rebellious figures, someone who had openly claimed the government was after him, just happened to die suddenly and conveniently with no real answers beyond the word overdose. The theory that emerged wasn't that ODB overdosed, but that he was silenced. And when you dig into the details, it becomes clearer why so many believe that theory. The idea that ODB was simply paranoid doesn't hold up easily when you look at the paper trail. After his death, it was discovered that the federal government had a 94-page FBI file on him, one that tracked his movements and associations from 1999 right up until the year he died. The file didn't begin as a look into a celebrity's erratic behavior. It started as a criminal investigation. The FBI had launched the probe after the NYPD labeled the Wu-Tang Clan a potential organized crime network, describing it as a mafia-like enterprise involved in drugs, illegal guns, violent crimes, and murder.
In the early 90s, the FBI were trying to put a RICO on you guys.
They always trying to put a RICO on us. We all got, a lot of us got drugs on our records. So they, some director, FBI director thought he was cool for him to we could put a RICO.
The FBI was watching one of the most powerful groups in hip-hop like they would a cartel, and ODB, one of the most outspoken and unpredictable members, was deep in their focus. The reports outlined connections between Wu-Tang and gun operations running from Staten Island to Ohio. There were mentions of photo identifications, informants, and surveillance used to track alleged firearm purchases and possible ties to unsolved murders. Wiretaps were reportedly part of the process. When people revisit that timeline, things start to feel unsettling. From 1999 to 2004, ODB's life looked like a man spiraling, but it could also be seen as someone reacting to very real scrutiny. He often changed his name, calling himself Osiris, reportedly to avoid government attention. He wore body armor, he kept weapons on him. In July 1999, he was pulled over in Ohio, and police found a shotgun and ammunition in the car. Earlier that year, he was involved in a shootout with New York officers and was later charged with attempted murder. Whether his actions came from paranoia or self-defense is up for debate, but one thing is clear: he believed he was in danger. Even when he wasn't the suspect, he was under the microscope. Around that same period, law enforcement started investigating a string of robberies targeting rappers, and ODB's name appeared again, this time as a victim. He told police that masked gunmen shot him in the arm and the back and stole his jewelry. The incident was noted in reports connected to ongoing investigations that involved both local and federal law enforcement. So, when people point to the government's involvement in ODB's story, it's backed by official documentation. The FBI considered his group part of a violent criminal network. They tracked him for years. Then suddenly, just as the file went quiet, he turned up dead. For some, that timing doesn't feel like coincidence.
CIA killed me.
Special cut on the album. What's the special cut? They got two. Oh yeah, you got two special cuts on the album. You got
47 cuts.
CIA killed me.
To the government, ODB might have been a liability. He was erratic, unpredictable, and spoke freely about things others wouldn't touch. To the culture, he was the embodiment of raw rebellion, the wild card of the Wu-Tang Clan who couldn't be tamed or silenced. That energy, combined with a paper trail of surveillance, forms the core of why this conspiracy refuses to die. The theory suggests that his death was the easiest solution to a long-standing problem. Years of monitoring, court cases, and constant public antics had turned him into both a nuisance and a risk. If there was ever a time to close the file, it would be when the subject stopped breathing. The official reports say otherwise, though. According to the medical examiner, ODB's death was accidental, caused by a lethal mix of drugs in his system. No signs of struggle, no evidence of tampering, no public claim of foul play. His friends and family mourned quietly, accepting what the report said, but the people who connected the dots between his paranoia and the FBI's watchful eye couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was at play. In the years that followed, the release of those government files added fuel to the fire. Every page confirmed that the surveillance was real. ODB's fears, once dismissed as delusion, now had a documented foundation. The coincidence of timing became the centerpiece of the theory. The FBI's active file on ODB and Wu-Tang officially closed not long after his death. Reports stated that there were no outstanding issues left to pursue. And that's where the believers in the conspiracy found their strongest point. They saw it not as an ending, but a convenient resolution. The story wrapped itself neatly. A man who caused constant trouble for authorities was gone. The file was closed, everyone moved on. The official stance remains that ODB's death was accidental, the result of drug use and stress. That's where the paperwork stops. But in the court of public opinion, especially among fans who grew up watching him spiral and shout warnings nobody believed, the story doesn't sit comfortably. The idea that he might have been taken out for what he knew, for what he represented, or simply for being too unpredictable, lingers. Jay-Z is a time traveler. His life is documented and preserved from his Brooklyn childhood in 1969 to his billionaire status today. But in 2013, an image surfaced that made people question everything they thought they knew about time. It was a snapshot that hinted at something impossible. According to believers, Jay-Z's history isn't just long, it's eternal. They say he's not just a man, but a ruler who has walked through decades untouched. The theory took shape after a discovery made by the New York Public Library's Schomburg Center. Hidden deep in their archives was a black and white photograph from 1939 taken in Harlem by a photographer named Sid Grossman. The image, titled Harlem Loiterers, showed a group of men standing on a city street during the tail end of the Harlem Renaissance. It was a typical city moment, except for one detail that stunned everyone who saw it. One of the men looked exactly like Jay-Z. The resemblance was so close that people didn't know what to believe. The man had the same facial structure, the same brow, even the same casual confidence. He wore a button-down shirt and a newsboy cap, a style that somehow echoed Jay-Z's own fashion choices decades later. But Jay-Z was born in 1969. The photograph was from 30 years before that. The contradiction in time felt too sharp to ignore. The question was simple but haunting. How could someone look so identical across generations? The photo quickly went viral, and with it came the flood of theories. For those who believe in the impossible, the explanation was clear. They said the man in the picture wasn't just a lookalike, it was Jay-Z himself. Somehow he had traveled back in time. Others took it even further, claiming that Jay-Z wasn't just moving through time, but that he had never truly aged. He had simply existed across centuries, slipping into new eras with new identities, watching the city he would one day rule evolve around him. The time travel theory connects directly to his deep ties with New York. To believers, Jay-Z's detailed knowledge of the city comes from more than lived experience. They argue it's historical knowledge, something only a person who's seen it all firsthand could possess. Some say he used his ability to move through time to study different eras, gathering information and insight that later became the foundation of his lyrics and his empire. In their eyes, this explains why he rose faster and further than anyone else. Others reject the science fiction angle but replace it with something even more supernatural. They see Jay-Z as an immortal being, one who has mastered the art of staying young and powerful through occult means. The idea ties into an older, darker tradition that associates wealth, power, and influence with ancient rituals. If Jay-Z truly hasn't aged, then, to believers, that eternal youth comes from somewhere beyond human understanding. They claim he carries the aura of someone who's seen empires fall and civilizations reborn, moving silently through history while maintaining control. The conversation doesn't stop at immortality. For some, it leads directly to the theories about global power structures. Jay-Z has long been connected to rumors about the Illuminati, secret societies, and hidden orders that supposedly control the world from behind the scenes. Believers say the hand signs he flashes on stage and in music videos are far more than branding. They're symbols of allegiance. They interpret his gestures, his lyrics, and even his album imagery as coded messages pointing to his position among the world's elite. In this version of the story, Jay-Z isn't just a time traveler or an immortal. He's part of a network of ancient figures who have maintained their dominance for centuries, using their knowledge to influence art, politics, and society. The idea is that fame is the continuation of a legacy. Every era, they say, has a few chosen ones who carry the same energy forward, guiding humanity while feeding off its admiration. Jay-Z's success, they believe, is just the modern face of that timeless hierarchy. Jay-Z himself has referenced the accusations, saying on Freemason, "Am I down with the devil cause my roof come up missing? Is that Lucifer juice in that 2-cup he's sipping?" He's essentially pointing out that people attribute his success to ties to a group like the Illuminati, or suggesting that he sold his soul to the devil. The theory even grew louder when other celebrities were drawn into similar claims. Photos of Nicolas Cage and John Travolta from the 1800s surfaced, showing people who looked exactly like them. In each case, believers said it wasn't coincidence, it was continuity. These weren't different people at all, but the same souls or entities returning under new names. Jay-Z, in their eyes, simply fits the pattern. He's another figure in the long line of those who've seemingly existed forever, always in positions of visibility and influence. But to the skeptics, the resemblance is nothing more than chance. They point to the way human beings are wired to find patterns, to connect familiar faces where none exist. They say that in a city as large and diverse as Harlem, it's inevitable that someone, somewhere, would share similar features. To them, the photograph is fascinating but harmless, a curiosity, not evidence of something supernatural. But to those who believe, that logic misses the point. Coincidences don't explain how Jay-Z's presence feels so much bigger than one timeline. Over the years, the theory has only deepened as Jay-Z's influence expanded. His ability to stay relevant, to evolve, and to dominate culture decade after decade has only fueled the story. Believers say it's because he already knows how history works. He's lived it before. His business instincts, his understanding of art and power, his control over his image, they all seem too precise, too perfect. For some, that level of mastery is evidence of experience that no normal human could accumulate in one lifetime. Even his connection to other powerful figures, his marriage to Beyoncé, his partnerships in fashion, sports, and tech are seen as parts of a bigger web. The idea that those around him are either aware of his true nature or unknowingly benefiting from it. Each success, each strategic move becomes another sign that he's operating on a level beyond the ordinary. The official stance remains unchanged. The photograph, they say, simply shows a man from 1939 who happened to share Jay-Z's features. No evidence supports the idea of time travel or immortality. Drake ordered XXXTentacion's murder. When XXXTentacion was ambushed and executed outside a Florida motorsports dealership in June 2018, the official narrative pointed to an armed robbery gone fatally wrong. But almost immediately, fans and observers began looking past the triggermen and toward one name, the biggest star in the world. The man X had publicly accused of wanting him dead, Aubrey Drake Graham. The tension between Drake and X had deeper roots than many realized, a clash between the underground and the mainstream, between a young rebel and an established global icon. X's rise in 2017 was sudden and raw. His breakout SoundCloud track, Look at Me, exploded online, earning him a massive cult following for his unfiltered aggression. Around the same time, Drake teased a new song, KMT, during a performance. Fans noticed something strange. Drake's flow and cadence on the track felt almost identical to X's style on Look at Me. The internet lit up with comparisons, and within days, X voiced his frustration, claiming Drake had taken his sound and run off with it. Drake denied stealing anything, saying he understood the comparison but wasn't the type to copy another artist. Still, the damage was done. What could have been a small misunderstanding quickly turned personal. X fired off harsh messages online, even bringing Drake's family into the feud. The beef became deeper than music, with X feeling like the industry heavyweight was trying to erase him before he fully arrived.
Tell Drake, Mom, I want some tapioca pudding. Hey, tell this Drake, stop speaking patois. You are not Jamaican.
Months before his death, X posted a chilling message on his Instagram story, saying if anyone tried to kill him, it would be Drake. Though he later deleted it and claimed he'd been hacked, the damage was already permanent in the minds of fans. To conspiracy followers, that wasn't a joke or a hack. It was a warning, an attempt to expose something he feared before it was too late. Then came part of the story that made the theory explode: Drake's lyrics. 3 weeks before X was shot, Drake released I'm Upset. For many online detectives, that song wasn't random. It was coded. They zeroed in on one line: SMS XXX, that's the only time I ever shoot below the neck. X's stage name contained XXX, and he was shot multiple times in the torso, below the neck. Some even claimed SMS stood for Send My Shooters. Another eerie connection came from a specific detail. X was robbed of a Louis Vuitton bag holding $50,000 in cash during the attack. In that same I'm Upset track, Drake rapped, "50,000 on my head is disrespect." The coincidence in numbers and timing only deepened suspicion among fans who believe the lyrics hinted at something darker. When Drake's album Scorpion dropped after X's death, those beliefs only grew stronger. On Mob Ties, Drake rapped about being sick of these ninjas and having connections to hire some help to get rid of these ninjas. To theorists, that sounded like a thinly veiled confession. He even mentioned a Louis bag again, reinforcing the link between the music and the murder scene. On Her Loss as well, he dropped the line, "If he held his tongue on that live, he'd be alive again," which many felt was a jab at X's fiery Instagram lives. To make things creepier, Travis Scott's Sicko Mode video featuring Drake had a scene of a figure resembling X getting hit by a meteor. To those who believe the theory, the motive wasn't just about a stolen flow. They claimed X had something much bigger, personal information about Drake that could have damaged his image permanently. Around that same period, Drake's hidden son, Adonis, became public knowledge after Pusha T exposed the secret on record. Theorists argued X knew about the child long before and was threatening to reveal more, suggesting that silencing him became a matter of control. The theory eventually reached a courtroom. 4 men, Dedrick Williams, Trayvon Newsom, Robert Allen, and Michael Boatwright, were charged with X's murder. During the 2023 trial, defense attorney Mauricio Padilla brought the conspiracy directly into the case, naming Drake as a potential figure who had never been questioned by authorities. He argued that investigators ignored the possibility because of Drake's status and influence. His legal strategy was clear: create enough reasonable doubt to shake the jury. Padilla tried to force Drake to testify by subpoena, but Drake's legal team fought it aggressively, calling it unreasonable and oppressive. They stated that Drake had never been named in any report or investigation and had no known connection to the case. Ultimately, the judge agreed, denying the subpoena and ruling there was no basis to question him. The 4 defendants were convicted, and one, Robert Allen, testified that the crime was a robbery gone wrong, not a hit. He made no mention of Drake. Still, even after convictions, the conspiracy didn't die. For many fans, Drake's escape from the courtroom only proved how powerful he was.